technology as a whole, at least computing. And the security just followed right in tow. I mean, you learn early on that without any semblance of organization or security, you run into problems that are, as we said earlier, I mean, businesses could go under. I've seen worse. So, just an example. I wasn't a direct security scenario, but a vendor of ours at a company I used to work for changed ERP systems, and they clearly didn't plan or execute well on the changeover, and they went out of business. Just that simple. I mean, there were supplier orders. There was somebody we bought boxes or something like that from, but it doesn't take much.
Do you have any certification for someone like me that wants to get into similar things as you guys, briefly?
There's troves of them available. Mm-hmm. I think once you narrow your focus a little bit and just discover what it is that you're truly interested in. Security is a pretty broad, set of circumstances. So I think once you find that what you like, there's an abundance of certificates available mm-hmm. out there. For Makes security, sense. I think it's probably more. They're probably. I think having that official sort of seal of approval from some organization telling you that you're capable of performing security services in an IT role is probably more important than it is in other functions of IT.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of certifications that you can get out there, your A+, the general certifications for computers, they're fine, but most employers want to find experience and know that you can, because there's a lot of people that are book smart, but I mean, they sit them down in front of a computer during an actual hack or something, and then they just lock up.
Here specifically, how do you guys stay up to date with changing threats? So like we were talking earlier, we've gone this year, part of last year, mainly this year, there's been a way more virtual setup. So obviously there's changing threats, more vulnerability as everybody's on a network, mm-hmm. and it's not all in person. Is there certain things you guys do? You touched on a firewall. What about that?
Probably most of it would be either vendor specific when they tell us when they know that there's issues out there and say, hey, you need to update firmware, in a hurry. But as far as articles and outlets to actually get the information, we were talking earlier. I mean, a lot of it is just. That stuff just kind of comes up in every, just in general reading, because now that stuff is so important that it's almost as, prevalent as celebrities getting married, because everybody's on the network, everybody's on the internet. And then, for example, last March when Zoom was just getting started and they found some crazy security flaw with it that they had to update in a hurry, and it was all over the news. So, I mean, you don't have to look too far. Unfortunately, that also means that stuff gets exposed pretty quickly, so it has to be addressed much faster. Where security flaw, maybe a couple of years ago, the people like us would know about it, but not the general public. As they're trying to get a fix going, and now as soon as someone knows about it, it's out there.
Having basic network security in place is a starting point where everyone should be coming from. So having something that took place like last year when the pandemic started, everywhere, whether it be a school, college, a business, I've worked in finance and manufacturing, banking. If you have the basic tenets in place, pivoting to be able to react to a scenario like we all experienced this time last year isn't as difficult as it is if you don't have the basic tenets of security in place. And I have those. It's listed as having responsible use policies in place. You have to count on your end users to participate in security. It's not just something that two guys sitting in a room say, hey, this is what we're doing and it's going to work. Without the users participating, it doesn't work. You have to have data. You have your data stored securely, as we talked about earlier. Create firewalls and approved lists of individuals who have access to the network, and continually monitor the networks. Those are basic tenants to just make sure that you're doing what you can. And then when something like a pandemic arises, then you start thinking about things like remote work, securing VPN connections, and some of the other problems that it's not very difficult to come by them in the technology news media, so to speak. As Greg said, it's pretty well covered.
What kind of attacks are you worried about? Would you say when stuff changes, like the pandemic, you have to pivot, and that's the type of like when everything's changing, you got to worry about then? What kind of attacks are you mainly?
I think you discover, and whether it be through a combination of experience and reports that you get from the end users, and things that you read in the media, in the technology media, or that you learn that, okay, so suddenly now, this time last year, we have 600 students or 400 students or however many it is are going to start working from their homes. What scenarios, and does that, how does that put us in a position for risk?
Yeah.
And telework is going to become as the pandemic winds down, we'll probably see less of it. But I think companies, as you said, are realizing they don't need to pay higher rent for expensive office space. They can have people work from their homes. Right now, there's a huge opportunity for exploiting networks via remote telework. I think that's the most prevalent right now, just tied into the pandemic.
A lot more web apps that are going to be created, so there's going to be more vulnerabilities. So can you think of any advice for my class of web developers that are creating things like these?
Just following standards, just keeping up to date on those standards as far as, HTML5, if whatever programs that you're running, if it's PHP or whatever you're plugging into the app, it has to be something that is current and that is not going to give you some fail points down the road, or even as soon as you launch it, because other people are using ones that are maybe not the right version, and lets those security and vulnerabilities into the application. With these attacks too, a lot of these businesses that are doing remote work, they're also deploying more of the home VPN like security appliances that their workers plug into, because let's face it, most people have just a router at home and there's no security on those, and that's a big risk if you just have someone that's browsing the internet from home with no filter, no anything to protect themselves from variant clicks that they might open something that they shouldn't. So I have seen a lot more of that involved. And we've deployed one of them just to try it. We don't have too many people that are here, they're remote, but I know a lot of businesses are looking at ways to make it so that those VPNs and the home networks are more secure, so they don't have to risk having those issues come onto their own network. Most of the stuff that's happened here, it's mostly been email related. Someone got some email and they don't know what it is, but they still click on the link that was in there anyways. We've had ransomware attacks or BitLocker attacks that would lock up files. And in every case, we've been able to restore previous files or whatever. But it comes down to just an education of the the end user. But I mean, even still today, we still see a lot of people that click on links that puts all kinds of malware on their computer, or they say something that comes up says, "Hey, your computer's infected," and those things, a lot of that stuff that pops up. I mean, that the end user's the big risk point. And then when it comes onto the network, you have the risk of those being spread out into different areas of to other people, just by they forward that email, or they copy it onto a thumb drive, or if it's just one of those variants it looks for other things on the network to spread to.
You mentioned balancing convenience and security is tough. One of the best ways to sort of hedge your bets there is to have good data security. And so if you have your data secure and you're confident in it, almost anything could potentially happen with regard to damaging your data. We're not talking about data loss. I mean, we read a lot of the news about companies like Facebook loses 500 million users' accounts.
The portal, you guys can make it so we have to change our password every 2 weeks, but you don't. So is there a certain philosophy you guys follow of convenience versus security? I've heard the regular is to keep the convenience. Places like schools, a little bit above because everything's exploitable no matter what, but you just want to make it so it's not.
You can make things impossible, so secure that they're not usable, and that's not what anybody wants. Having these other 4, or you even suggested there's probably 6 or 8 more tenants in place, where you can reel back a little bit on some of the staunch policies where, like you said, I mean, you have to change your password every 2 weeks. People would, I mean, if you knew, well, I think our password change policy is every 90 days or 60 days or whatever it is. You get into a cycle where you start to see where a significant size group of people have to change their passwords. There's ancillary problems that spawn off of that, where it's now suddenly this doesn't work and this doesn't work and I forgot how to update this. 90 days is long enough for people to forget stuff. So, but yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. In this environment, typically you can lean a little bit towards the convenience factor, but if you do it too far, you take too many things for granted, you could end up in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, the more hurdles that you put out there, usually people find ways around the hurdles, which sometimes it's more dangerous that way because they're looking for hey, I found this application that'll let me do it, without having to change this or that. And then, they're using, VPNs and different things like that to try to get around security or having to change their password. And then they're using things they're making things even more insecure than what you originally intended for. And so it's just finding that balance between what people are willing to do and knowing your end user base so that, okay, I know they'll at least do this. So to counter that, I'm going to put some hardware or some security software that'll kind of balance that out to kind of take less of the pressure off the end user so that you can, make sure that at least then things are staying as secure as you can comfortably make it.
You were hinting towards networks where you don't want to put everything on the same network. Somebody gets in there, they have access to this thermostat, this TVs, they have all this other stuff is tied into one. So you were saying you like to section it out, so like 10 networks and all of them have different things on them. Maybe touch on that a little bit.
So we deploy a Cisco Meraki network that was just put in just before the school year, and a lot of it was just in response to COVID because Meraki is a web-based or web-driven system. So there's nothing management-wise here on campus. It's all web-based. So what makes it nice is that if we're off campus for some reason, whether it be another lock-in kind of situation, we can still manage it from afar. But ideally, it's a layer 7 firewall. So layer 7 goes all the way down to the application level. So the nice thing is that if there is an issue, we're able to track down from the firewall all the way down to the switch, to the access point, and then to the computer, and to find out what application is causing the errant issue that might be going on. But the nice thing is it gives us a dashboard that shows basically everything with the network as a health-wise. But it also reports to us when certain attacks are going on to our network specifically.
Wow.
So like if the firewall is seeing, hey, this IP address is trying to get into whatever, it gives us reports of current stuff that's going on.
You can block that IP address.
Yeah, and most of that stuff, it knows based on our firewall rules, it knows that this looks suspicious, so it blocks automatically. So that more often than not, we have to allow it. Like the school allows all traffic out, but coming in, it's much more restricted.
Condensed. Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
a lot of times when stuff is coming in, it's like, okay, this is not in those rules, so it just blocks it. And then if it's something that's legitimate, then we can go through and say, no, this is okay, and then we can make a rule for that. But for the most part, the VLANs, we've got students' devices, faculty devices, even like administrative staff, printers, cameras, and not even so much for security. It also helps for the health of the network because something like a security camera is pumping through a bunch of data.
Yeah.
And if you got all that data just going through with all the rest of the traffic, something's going to get messed up.
Huge video file saving.
Yeah,
over
so with all that traffic going through, to give them their own lane of the highway so that it's not congesting everything else, it really helps. When there is an issue, like last summer, someone took a network cable and they plugged the other network cable into the wall, and then they took the other end, let's just go, and then they plugged it into the wall, and it made the network just go absolutely bonkers because it's a loop. It's seeing itself basically. And so, but in order for us to track that, you have to have identifying marks to know where this excessive,
tracing,
you have to know where it's coming from. So the Meraki really allows us to do that in ways that previously we had no visibility. Like I said, we can do it from our phones, we can do it from off campus, we can do it here. It allows us to be able to monitor things in ways that we weren't able to before. But that's our base level defense as far as getting people on the network safely, but also to minimize if like a student, maybe a student from China, he has a messed up version of Windows. Maybe it wasn't a legit copy, and it's got a bunch of backdoor stuff that's sitting on it. If that was, we could go back and go, oh, okay, and then we can say, okay, this MAC address, we need to block that because there's something going on, and then hopefully they'll come in and talk to us and say, let's take a look at your computer, let's make sure what's going on.
Yeah, I like that.
Like malware and stuff that you see like that comes on computers. All that stuff leaves trails behind it. So it's nice having the ability to look at that kind of information because, it's not so much for like a big brother kind of overlooking everything. It's more, some people, their computers are so shot, they might only be a year and a half old, but they're like, man, this thing's slow. And you're like, well, yeah, you've got, multiple foreign governments, snooping through your stuff.
Yeah.
You probably should clean this up. Just kind of getting people aware of that so that, they keep those security updates, in check. Sure.
So do you guys have any idea of like what will evolve from how the internet will evolve over the next 5 years and internet security, like will change?
Yeah, like we said earlier, I think teleworking is creating an opportunity for hackers to look at VPN and RDP connections. And as you said, as a result of economic factors, some companies may not require on-premise work at all anymore. So that significant uptick in remote work is going to be something that I think you're going to see a lot of vulnerabilities get exposed to there. And a lot of times you don't know what the problems are until somebody points them out to you. So
until you have to hire somebody to go.
Well, or until some nefarious, person decides to expose the problem. Generally, that's how you discover the shortcomings. People have been talking about how mobile devices can become a serious point of contact for security issues. How it hasn't happened yet.
When you say mobile devices,
scale,
what do you think like from that?
Mobile phones.
What would happen?
It's a good question.
Oh,
how something hasn't happened yet is beyond me. It's been, I've had an iPhone since forever, a long time it seems like, and how somebody hasn't figured out a way to affect something with them is incredible. Cryptocurrency could become a point of
vulnerability
reflection for security issues. So IoT, I think, will be a serious point of vulnerability over the course of the next 5 years, without any doubt. It just seems to be becoming more and more prevalent in the world. So, and I think also, we've been seeing over the course of the last several years a kind of rush to have everything cloud-based, which is great for a guy like Greg or myself, to where we don't have 10 servers sitting in a room somewhere hosting the school system's software system. It's cloud-based, and we pay a subscription and use the software. And I think that's, software as a service is going in that direction. As such, you'll see a significant uptick in security exposure with everything rushing to be cloud-based. It just is.
Yeah.
People go where the
they follow the crowd.
are,
Yeah.
So So yeah, I think those are a handful of things that you'll see a significant uptick in over the course of the next 5 years, if not the next 2 years.
There's no really such thing as a hardwired connection anymore. I mean, devices are getting rid of the network ports left and right. I mean, Macs haven't had them for now a while. PCs are kind of going the same way. So with everything going wireless, I mean, that really puts a lot of pressure to keep those networks upgraded, updated. As the more demand, out there for faster and faster internet connections over the next 5 years, the amount of changes that are going to happen to wireless infrastructure is just going to be phenomenal. And the more security they're going to need, because things that would normally never be on Wi-Fi because the companies wouldn't do it. They're going to have to, and because they're going to go out of business if they're not going to able to provide a Wi-Fi version of it. So just from the sake that the growing Wi-Fi infrastructure that's been going on, and there's some companies that they don't keep up with it. I mean, they just say, well, it's wireless, people get on, great. And now we got WPA3, we've got all kinds of different infrastructure out there that just keeps popping up. And just from what we've seen, I mean, it's advancing at a really quick pace, almost to the point where we've had a number of wireless installer vendors that said, yeah, probably at some point in the next 10 years, Wi-Fi will actually be considered a high voltage device, because the devices will need so much power to put out the 1 or 2 or 3 gigabit connections that they're going to be pumping out, and they won't be able to be plugged in through a little simple connection. It'll have to have a full 110 or more to actually power these massive high capacity devices to serve to basically serve the demand, which keeps going up. I mean, we see lots of demand. There's tons of people that are using YouTube and things that are not even school related, that you're like, well, that takes up bandwidth, and then that just the need just keeps going up and up. And I think we started, I think 2 years ago we were at 250 megabits average. I think now we're around the 350, 400 megabits average off our internet, and we have a gigabit connection, but you can tell that, eventually that gigabit connection will probably be, it won't be fast enough for us. And it's amazing to think that, we only have like 1,000 people here on campus, and we're pushing that as it is. So, but everything is connected. It doesn't matter if it's your watch, your phone. Anything is connected now. So just having the security of that, as that expands out, that'll be a challenge over the next 5 years for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Great information. Appreciate you guys stopping in.